welcome to the first episode of Life Matters, an actuality series where we are going to discuss and unpack current topics and get advice on many of the challenges we have to face. In recent months, we were faced with a global pandemic which affected most aspects of our lives, whether it be the loss of a loved one, the loss of employment, or even a relationship. Loss and ultimately grief in general was the order of the day. Let's hear from our church leaders about grief.
My dear brothers and sisters, the past year 2020 was characterized by the coronavirus pandemic. Reports have reached me from all around the world, many of them filled with worry and grief. But there's one thing that this crisis has not been able to take from us: our trust in God. He is and remains our Heavenly Father, who wants only the best for His children.
It's always comforting to know that God is in control and helps us through life's challenges. So how do I deal with all these grieving emotions? To help us understand some of our questions, we invited Heinrich Benjamin, psychologist, to the studio. Heinrich, thank you very much for joining us. Let's not waste any time. Let's start immediately. What exactly is grief?
Thank you, Tracey, for having me. Grief is a natural response to loss. It refers to the emotional pain we feel when someone or something important to us has been taken away. This could be a loss of a loved one, a loss of a relationship, even a loss of a family pet that was close to us. Now in COVID, we've seen a lot of people also suffer loss, and it goes a little bit further than losing just a loved one. It could be the loss of my job. It could be the loss of my home that I lived in. A lot of people lost their homes, a loss of health. We've even seen that the research has gone wider, and it included things like ecological grief, which many people don't know about, but it's people that work in the nature conservation, and we see some of the plants and even animals going extinct, and people have also had a reaction to that. They've experienced loss when they experience and go through that. So what has happened is grief, or the process of grief and understanding of it, it's widened over time. It's not just when we lose a loved one. And all of these factors can activate the grieving process, and it can give rise to strong emotions like anger and even depression.
Now, the moment we hear things like anger and depression, people start running away. It's almost something that they don't want to speak about. But that's all part of the grieving process.
Absolutely.
So what is that process?
I think just to give a little background to there are many theories and models around grief. And the most widely accepted one was developed by this lady called Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She is a psychiatrist by profession, and she developed these 5 stages of grief. And the first stage we talk about is it's denial, shock and denial. You usually find that when we suffer loss, the first reaction is like, I can't believe that happened. Some people even comment and say like, I feel numb. I can't believe that has actually happened. I just spoke to this person yesterday. It's so unexpected. But this is just a defense mechanism that the brain uses to minimize the overwhelming pain that we feel following the loss. So in a way, the brain is protecting itself. It's protecting you from feeling the full impact of that loss. And it's an automatic process. It's not like you can choose whether you're going to deny or not. Your brain just does it automatically. Now, as that process begins to, you work through it, it gives rise to the next stage, which is anger. Now, usually what the anger does, in the same way that denial and numbness helps you to kind of prevent yourself from feeling it, when you move over into the anger stage, now the reality of the loss is becoming more apparent, and you realize that this person is no longer there. And this usually can bring about feelings of anger. And this anger can be misdirected sometimes. Anger at God, anger at the world, the government, whatever the individual feels is responsible for it. Even sometimes people feel angry at the loved one that passed away. Why did you leave me? But again, it's a defense mechanism that now helps us to deal and process the pain. And what anger does, it gives us an outlet for that emotional pain. So in the first instance, we knew, or we understand, that it kind of protects you from feeling it. And now it's moved on to now there's an outlet for it. And usually after that process, we find that people go into a stage of depression. And here, once the anger is settled, the panic, the horror, we begin to feel it even more intensely. Now we realize the loss in the present moment. This individual is no longer there. They don't say hello to me in the morning. It's the colleague that used to say hi in the morning. Those things are no longer happening. And this now brings about the feelings of depression and sadness. And this is perfectly normal because, again, the brain is trying to process the pain. And this is a normal reaction. What follows the normal process. Usually closely linked to the depression is a stage called bargaining. And here people often bargain with God. You know, we would say things like, Lord, just make the pain go away. Lord, if you help me through this, I'll change my life.
I'll go to church more often, correct, that kind of thing. Okay.
Active in the congregation, the whole story. Even while someone, and we've seen it when people are ill on their deathbed possibly, we would also bargain with the Lord and say, look, Lord, please just help me through this and I'll make those changes and attend more services, read the Bible. But again, it's just it's like a last attempt to deal with it or to kind of survive the pain. And it's a natural instinct, it's a survival instinct that the brain uses to help you process it. But we know it doesn't really help as much, but maybe in the moment it does, it makes us feel better. We've spoken to God about it, but then we soon realize I can't maintain that anymore. We go over into the next phase, or the final stage, which is acceptance. Now, acceptance doesn't really mean that I will no longer feel the pain or that I won't be triggered, let's say, emotionally when something regarding the loved one or the loss now, you know, it reminds me of them or of the item possibly that I've lost. And acceptance simply means that we find meaning now. We understand, and we use our faith a lot in this time to kind of understand, Lord, and I don't fully understand, but I got faith and I trust you that, Lord, this is what you decided, or this is what you allowed. And meaning could mean different things to people. So we may find comfort as Christians that God has got a plan for us. Other people see it as part of another process, whichever that may be. But it's normal to go through that. But here's the thing I want to mention. Now, these stages are presented almost in a way that they are steps or that they are phases. In reality, it doesn't work that way. We can feel all those things even in one day. We could today feel I've accepted. Tomorrow we could be like, hey, I can't believe this person passed away. I can again feel angry. And it's normal to feel that way. It's normal to jump around. It's part of the grieving process. And we've spoken early on. We said there's no final destination in this thing. It's a journey you go through. And that special person will always have a place in your heart, and it's normal to even 5, 6 years later, 10 years later, still feel some form of emotional pain. But we find that once we move into the acceptance stage, we won't use those survival techniques anymore. We won't use it as much as we did in the beginning when we suffered the loss. So there will be less of a denial, less anger, less depression, less bargaining. You'll find comfort more in the meaning that the loss has for you and your family and the reality of it now going forward.
I think which is very important just to understand it's a constant journey. But like you say, once you've had the acceptance, once you've made the acceptance, you're like, okay, this is what it is, but I can still feel the sadness. It doesn't mean I've taken away from the acceptance.
Exactly.
Which is important to remember.
Very important.
Now, yeah, we spoke to a few of our members to hear how they deal with their grief.
I wouldn't place myself in a particular grief box stage at this point. I know in the beginning I went through a lot of shock naturally, a lot of denial, and I'm still in the denial phase. that does sometimes translate into a little bit of, anger and outward bursts, maybe things around me, people around me, things that's going on in my life that are maybe a bit too much to deal with emotionally. But I would definitely say denial mostly. That's how I've been dealing with the grief. I am working through that and trying to get to the upward working through stage from the denial stage. So I'm doing a whole lot of jumping and skipping dependent on how I'm feeling and what's going on in my life at a particular point in time, because life goes on, and that's the worst part about it.
The most difficult stage that I had to deal with was the pain of losing my parents. I still feel it as raw as what it was, because my dad passed, and then 8 days later my mother, and you just move past it, and then another one hits, and the shock is actually numbing. So I feel like I didn't feel anything, and then when the feelings are felt, it's like a hole. So I still feel that I can't believe that they are gone, and with that comes the pain after. I feel like it's shock that I'm still in, and then the pain. And you always hear people. It's the first time I've gone through this. My husband lost his dad about 12 years ago, and it didn't affect me obviously as much as this situation that I'm in. But the pain when people say to you that they can feel it, the actual physical pain, and that's what I felt. So I feel like I'm in pain still and in shock.
I think talking about my mom's passing, it's very painful for me. I thought that we are over it, but now as I'm talking it for the first time, I can see that I'm still grieving. Maybe it's because we're not talking about it. Or is it maybe, I don't know, we never got any counseling because we thought, no, we are over it. But now talking about it really brings sadness, pain, as if it just happened yesterday.
When my mom passed, I was very upset. 86, good innings. She lived a long time, and we were very fortunate that all of us, we had a gran right until 86. I wanted to go with her. I was so sad. I thought of Christmas. How can I have Christmas without her? New Year. Oh, it was terrible. I look at her and I say to her, thank you for what you've taught me. And if I want to be close to her, then I have to be close to the Lord. And if I'm close to the Lord, then I'm close with her. Because she lived it, she ate it, she slept it.
So listening to many of those members, we can hear that everyone deals with grief differently. Heinrich, you touched on it earlier. You said grief, it is a journey. But is there a correct way in which to deal with grief?
I think it's a very important point that you highlight. Grief is very much an individualized process. So it's different for different people. We are unique, and we will navigate our way through the grieving process very differently. There's no right or wrong way, and there are some common ways that people deal with grief and go through the process, but it's never identical. Yeah, I think it's almost useful to mention that sometimes as members and friends, we want to say something encouraging to the person. And I've often heard people say things like, stay strong or be strong. Now, although we know this is meant with a good heart, we're trying to encourage the person not to lose hope and faith, but we need to be mindful also that when we say to people, be strong, you know what, pull yourself together, those comments can even make the individual feel that his or her pain is not valid. So we much rather want to take a stance of asking the person, how are they feeling? Is there something I can do for you? That will be a better approach to approach it with a lot more empathy. So I feel that will be important for us to know. That's maybe one comment. We've even heard people at funerals say things like, I can't believe this woman isn't crying, or they're not even crying. It's different for different people. You may find that some people are comfortable and maybe less guarded, and they're able to cry in the open, and some people prefer to close their door and do that alone. That's also okay. I think we just want to be mindful of those comments, that we don't do it in a way that doesn't validate the person's feeling, or the way that they are grieving make them feel it's wrong.
Heinrich, I'm very glad you were touching on that, because during times of grief, support from friends and family can make a big difference. Let's hear how our members experienced support.
There's one sister in the congregation that sent me messages every single day about being happy that my mom's gone and that she's in a better place. No more pain, no more suffering. My brother was fantastic as usual. He always gives me a lifeline, and his wife. And we sat, and the big thing is to be able to speak about it. You need to talk. You need to talk and say how you feel. And when you want to cry, then cry. And that's how you get to the stage where you finally know that, she is in a better place. And that's the reassurance of the wonderfulness. You will see your loved one again.
In those first 2 weeks after losing because my dad passed first and then my mother passed away, and just people dropping off meals that you can just put in the oven or put in the freezer, freeze it and put it in the oven. So that was, I even feel like saying thank you to the people that have done it. And it hasn't stopped. So you get to a point where after the memorial services or funerals, everything just dies down. But there are certain people that just stuck there and kept messaging me and kept phoning. Now I'm okay with phone calls and speaking about it. And like I say, weekends I'm at my saddest and lowest points, where my kids even say, "Why is your eye so red, mommy?" And I'm like, "I'm sad because of Ma and Pa," and then we move on.
The people who were there for us, it's my family. They said, "We're coming," whether it's, and quite surprisingly, the people around, which is the neighbors, people who don't even belong to the church, they were there. They said, "We don't care, not for this mom. She would do anything for you." What really stood out for me in this time of grieving with my children, we wouldn't have done it if my mom did not bring us into closely to the Lord, because through her faith, everything to us was possible. Even when we had the meetings in the house, for the funeral arrangements and all that, when there was a misunderstanding, some people don't want to agree on something, I would just tell my sister, let's leave it. It's going to happen the way it's supposed to happen. That's what my mom always tells us. And really, everything just will go smoothly. And where did I get that? I got it from my mom.
What I found most helpful about us, our moms, our support structures around us, is that we all recognize that we each have our own grieving process. We all recognize that just because you didn't come and speak to me about it, or just because I haven't seen you for months, doesn't mean that you're upset with me. It just means that you're trying to deal with this in your own way, because the scar is still very fresh and very new. And what I'm grateful for is that we all at that point where, the one isn't like, "Oh, get over it, I'm over it already." I mean, not that harsh, but, I've dealt with it, why aren't you dealing with it? So everyone understands that it's not going to happen. We go through this thing where people say time will heal it. I think what is also helping me with my family is we're all like, time is not healing. It's been 8 or 9 months already. it still feels like it happened yesterday. Time is not healing it, so that helps a lot to go through it together with them, to go through this together with them, because it's all our first time losing a parent or losing a husband or losing a wife, so close to you, so we can all be there for each other and deal with it together. With friends, they support me in a way where if I need to talk, they're there, but I don't talk, so they also understand that, you know, let's just not put too much pressure on her for a lot of other things that we would normally, etc., etc. Let's just give her some time and space to heal. So that has helped me a lot as well, not to get to that stage of grief, if you want to call it that, where I'm just like, you know what, I can't handle this. So I take it day by day, literally day by day.
Heinrich, there are so many things that one shouldn't say and be very careful of. I remember hearing someone say to someone else, you know, God knows what is best. And I think that's also something, even though we think it's a comforting thing to say, it is not always. What is the best way in which you can support someone who's grieving?
Yeah. I think that's a very important point that you highlight, that there are some helpful ways and unhelpful ways to help and support someone. One of those things that are not so helpful is when we try and fix this person. We try and fix the problem. And often when we do that, we become a little bit more impatient. We nudge this person to talk about their grief. We tell this person, stay strong, or God knows best. And although it's meant with a good heart and the intention is to help this person, we must know that it's not our responsibility to fix the person. What we can do is be available to that person and listen with empathy and an open heart. I think here we also need to be careful, because sometimes when people talk about their grief and their pain, what tends to happen is it triggers maybe our loss. Now we begin to talk about the loss we suffered. And in a way, although it's good and you need to judge the conversation, how it's going, but sometimes it can even take away from the experience for that person who you're trying to comfort and be there for. When I now begin to talk about my grief, I take over the space, and now this person is comforting me at the end of the day. So I just want to be careful when I do that I listen and I am patient with this person, and I try not to force the issue. I try not to force them to talk about it, or to force them to do something that they're not ready to do. I think here, often when people suffer loss, we don't really know what to say or how to say it. Here we can ask the individual, how are you doing? Is there anything I can do for you? You could even state it and say, I'm not quite sure how to help you. What can I do for you? And it can range from things that are practical and even things that are more just supportive, listening to the person. So I've heard some people say, look, I phoned up, I cooked food and I brought it to the family. Some people have sent encouraging messages, Bible words, just reminding them that you're thinking of them and you're praying for them. And if they want to talk to you, you are available for them. One of the things that we can also encourage them to do is to seek professional help. Counseling is important. A lot of people sometimes get stuck and they feel like God can help them through this. We can just pray and the problem will go away. And I mean, there is value in prayer, there is value in trusting God, but the Lord has also allowed professional people and developments in the area of therapy and counseling to help us along. And I think that's very important, that we seek out therapy. Even if we are skeptical, give it 1 or 2 sessions. I think most people change their minds after 1 or 2 sessions. And this is so helpful for me because I'm able to express myself in a confidential space. I've got a safe space to speak openly about how I want to or how I feel I want to, because we're not always able to share everything with a family member or friend, because there might be that fear that I might be judged in the way I'm feeling.
I was going to say that, because if you are in a space of still being angry about certain things and family members are not understanding that, you are then in that space where you can completely let that out with someone that can just take it and just look at it for what it is.
Absolutely, I agree. And there are some natural things that you can do. There is overwhelming evidence and research that supports that physical exercise, as an example, helps you with your mental health. So something like taking a walk, exercising, drinking lots of water, trying to get enough sleep in. Those are all helpful, natural things that we can do in order to work through it. Because once we begin to feel better physically, mentally it also improves. We've heard the say, a healthy body, a healthy mind. Those words are true, and that's something that we can do.
And not be ashamed about it. Just do the things and go out there, ask for the help. Do what you need to do to get better at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Heinrich, over the last year, we know what's been happening. There was just loss everywhere. And something that I realized, and personally a friend of mine, she had lost her mother and her father hadn't been informed yet because her father was still ill. She hadn't had the time to tell her dad. But how people had jumped on social media within minutes after the news breaking. She hadn't even shared it yet. This was something that really hurt her, and I think it added to her grief. What is your stance on that? How important is it that people just wait, especially if it's not their news to share?
100%. I think social media, there's good in it, and sometimes it can also be destructive if we don't use it properly. I've found that a lot of people, perhaps they've heard the news that someone had passed on, and then they immediately go on social media. They immediately phone people to find or to sympathize. But like you said in your example, people have not been informed yet, and we don't know the full context and extent of the issue. And without sometimes verifying the source of the message, my advice would be that people don't just quickly share. Rather, verify the information and give the family time. Give it a cooling off period and wait for the family to make it known on social media. That way you can rest assured that everyone had been informed, because we've had many instances that perhaps someone was driving and they haven't been informed yet, a close family member, they get messages from friends who meanwhile, they want to help, they want to sympathize, but they don't know where this individual is, and they should rather wait for the family to, I would even, if I had to put a duration on it, wait 1 or 2 days, yes, or wait for the people to post it themselves. I've seen something very nice that some of the family members had asked another individual to post it on social media, and they would state there with permission from the family or as requested by the family. That will help. But I would rather say wait for the information to be verified, and if you desperately need to know, rather phone the people directly before sharing with others and ask. But I would even suggest wait a little bit. It's a time for family to join together and be close and deal with it, and now they get to inform the rest of us. So yeah, it's not your story to tell. We need to wait for the family or the individuals to actually come out with it themselves.
Absolutely, Heinrich. Wonderful points. You shared so much with us, and we really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Now, yeah, to the viewers, we would love to hear from you. Please engage with us on our social media platforms so that we can have a chat about today's episode and maybe even on future topics that you would like for us to address. From me, Tracey, and the team, goodbye.